Hi everyone, welcome back to the next episode. So this is where we're up to. Got my book, got my 5 signatures, sewing some lace and things on them to start them off. And now we're going to put these into here. Put the signatures to one side for a moment and I'll explain to you how to do this. Start with a piece of paper or card. I'm using manila folder, but you can use anything, and cut it so that it is wider than the spine by some 2.5 inches on either side, just so that you get a good grip, because what you're going to do is put your signatures on here and then you're going to stick this into your book. So if you only leave a little bit here, it's going to be more difficult to stick. So that's why I'm saying, as a guide, 2.5 inches on either side of your spine is a good guide. I'll actually measure that for you. I don't measure things, so apologies for that. But when I measure that, it's, look at that, 2.5 and 2.5, almost perfect. The next thing is to get your scoreboard out, and I'm going to use a pencil just to show you, so it shows up on camera, but you don't have to use a pencil, although you can. So I'm going to find the center point of that, which I had, which is there. And then I'm going to score across each 1/4 of an inch. Now the reason I'm using the scoreboard is because it's much easier to do a 1/4 of an inch on the scoreboard than it is with a ruler. So I'm just putting a line down here. So you can draw a line or you can do a score. It makes absolutely no difference. Oops. Okay, we'll just ignore that. I've got 5 lines, so these will be my 5 signatures. Each of the signatures is going to sit on one of those lines. So there'll be one there. Let's put this one here so you can see. There'll be one there, and then the next one is going to go on the next line. You're going to have a 1/4 of an inch between each of your signatures. So if you want to put something bulky on here or on here, you've got some leeway to do that, and when you put things in the middle, they'll be able to open up a bit more. The next thing is to take the piece of paper that you've just marked, or card that you've marked, and we need to put some holes in the center. Normally I wouldn't measure, but I'll measure today. So this is about 8.5, so at 4.25 inches is roughly my halfway point. And then 1/2 of 4.25 is 2 1/8, and it's easier for me to measure 2 1/8 on this ruler if I have it like that. 2 1/8. I'm doing a 3-stitch binding. You can do 5 stitches, but I find that 3 holds it perfectly. So 2 1/8. So you make 3 lines horizontally on your page like that. And then each of these points in here is going to get a hole in them. So you're going to take your pokey tool or your needle or whatever it is you use to poke a hole with. I use an awl, it's called, but it's a pokey tool. And poke holes in those 5 things. So you're going to end up with 15 holes. When you're poking holes in your card, you need something soft underneath it. So I've got this old piece of foam. These were purpose made for this job, and you could also use an old soft mouse mat, the ones from years ago that were about this thick, or if you don't have either of those, just use an old book. So just poke into the pages. You need something soft because you don't want to be poking into a hard surface. You'll ruin your tip of your pokey tool. And then you just poke through the holes. Take a separate piece of paper or card, this is more of that manila folder, and position it so that it's the same distance, so you've got it exactly where it needs to be, and just mark where those holes have got to go. And by turning it up the other way, use your tool and poke through it. So this will serve as a template to actually create the holes in each signature. I'll put that one aside. Take your signature, make sure that everything's where it needs to be. Make sure it's up the right way. So you've got all the pages are up the way you want them. Be careful with anything that's small like this, because you want to make sure that where they're positioned, actually 2 pieces of thread, they're going to have 2 holes. If they've only got one, they can just pull out of the book quite easily. So that's looking good. And then hold your signature. Now a lot of people clip their signatures with bulldog clips or pegs or things, and you can even get special tools to do that. I don't clip my signatures. I find that that's a bit fiddly for me, and I just manage to get my pages everywhere when I clip. So I'm just folding that in. See how I've got my template in there? It's right top and bottom. I'm taking my pokey tool and I'm just going to poke into the fold. And watch your hands coming out the other side. Okay, so that's one, and then another one. Some of these pages are quite thick, so I'm just turning the tool back and forth like that to get it through. Hold it all together in the same place and push it through for the last one. And there it is coming out there. So now you've got holes through your first signature, and we're going to put it in. I start in the middle and work my way out. Again, personal preference, that's just what I do. When you're sewing your signatures, the best thing to use is some waxed linen. So I use this one, which is from the Vintage Paper Co. in the UK, and it's waxed linen bookbinding thread. I buy a pack of 4, so this is the 4th one at one time. They also sell bookbinding needles, which is what this is. I think there's a pack of 10 that I bought, and they're not super expensive, and they arrive in about 4 or 5 days. I just get them on eBay, and they arrive really, really quickly. If you don't want to buy these, you can use wax thread from other places, or you can get yourself some tailor's beeswax and you can wax your own. So you just run the thread through that. Now we're going to bind. So take your thread and tie a loop around the end. Just a loose knot, a loose loop. Then take your piece. So this is the piece that's going to sit inside the cover of your book. I'm going to turn it over so that I don't have those lines when I look through it. Turn it over the back. Take your signature. Start in the middle of your signature, so we've already poked those holes in there. Now, if you can't get it in, that's fine. Just gently pull it like this, 1 page at a time, and it will go through. You'll find after you've done 1 or 2, it'll be easier for you. So we'll just put it through, find wherever that hole is, which are pretty easy to see. We're going through the middle of the signature, remember? We're keeping everything, making sure everything is up the right way. We're threading this onto our needle. Often it'll just go through. It depends how thick your papers are. Mine are quite thick and there's quite a lot of them in this signature. So I'm just gently threading that onto the needle. I think there's 2 more. Make sure you stay in the middle hole, that you're not moving holes so you don't suddenly have a piece of paper sticking out in a funny place. And once you get through the middle, you need to then sew it into your signature. So I've pulled the thread through, and that loop at the end is just to stop it pulling all the way through, but still be gentle. And then put it into the center hole of your signature. You can start on the other side. You can start and go from the outside to the inside. I just start from the outside. It's just from the inside, sorry. That's just what I do. And then pull all this through so that you'll be able to tighten it later, but that's where it's going to sit, right? See that? Then go to the outside and go in the top hole or the bottom hole. I'm going in the top hole, and then put it back through the top hole of each of the pages. Now again, if you hold your signature and just kind of flick it, you'll find that it'll go through a lot easier than the other coming out. I don't know why that is, it just seems to work. I'm just threading those on and getting it all the way into the center. So here we come into the center. Make sure you have got it through your card as well. You see the thread there? That's the thread. Then you're going to skip the center hole and go down to the bottom hole. And again, thread this on to the needle. I'm just checking that I'm in the right place as I'm coming through. You can see there's my little paper bag, because it is quite easy to suddenly miss the hole and end up in some weird place. And make sure you're also in the top hole of the middle line. That's what we're working on, the middle line. So out the back again. Check your loop is still there, because you don't want to pull this all the way through, or you have to start again. I'm going to fix this up, so don't worry if it's, see how that's loose? Don't worry about that at this point, it's all fine. You can keep it a bit firm, but don't panic if it's a bit loose. Then go back through the center hole and back through that hole where in the center of all the signature again. It is a bit fiddly, but this is how I do it. Pull through. You can see me threading those, making sure it's my paper bag. I want to make sure I'm on that, and that I'm not creating brand new holes, because then you'll end up with the signature not sitting correctly. Through. Through and in through the center, and we're back in the center. Now then you tighten it. Now when you tighten it, don't pull hard, because you may rip some of your pages, especially if they're not sitting in the right position. So we're just going to gently sort this out by flipping it over, pulling these threads, and pulling this thread so that we're nice and tight to the center. So it needs to be taut, as in T-A-U-T, not T-A-U-G-H-T. So it needs to be taut. It doesn't need to be so that it's pulling the pages and that they're curling up like this. So just make sure it's taut, and you should be able to do this with it. Hear that click? If you can't sort of get that sort of pingy sound when I'm pulling that thread up with my pokey tool, then it's probably not tight enough. If it starts to rip your holes, it's probably too tight. And the other thing too is make sure that both of these threads that I'm about to tie are either side of this center thread, so that it catches that when you're tying it. Take your needle off. Just do one tie in it. Now I want to check. I like to go through and see that I've got no sort of loop. There might be a loop in here, in which case your book's not going to stay firm. So it just is worth, I think, worth the time just to look at each page and make sure that there's no loop of thread that's been caught up in there for some odd reason. And there's not. Tie it up a second and a third time. You can leave these long, you can cut them off, you can tie them in a bow, it doesn't matter, whatever you want to do, it's up to you. I usually cut them, give them some length. And that is your first signature. Now the trick now is that you have to sew all these signatures in, and you've got to sew them the same way as I just demonstrated, but this is going to be in the way. So the next one is going to go here, but of course when you're sewing that in, you're dealing with this other signature. And then when you're sewing the third and the fourth one in, so I usually put the center one, then I sew one on each side. So I'll do one on this side and one on this side, and then I'll do the fourth one, and then I'll do the outside. So I start from the center, and then I do the two next ones and then the two final ones. Obviously if you have less signatures or more signatures, you will not have as many to put in. So if you've only got 3 signatures, you'll just have one on each side. But again, I can't stress enough, when you sew this next signature in, make sure it is up the same way as your original signature. You don't want to open your book to find that all of a sudden you've sewed all these signatures in and you get that. Trust me, you have to unpick it all, cut it all and start again. So that's signature number 1. Now I'm going to go away and sew in the remaining 4 signatures, and I will catch you at the next video. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I will attempt to answer them.